Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Gentle Yoga with Keith Beasley. My name is Christy, and I'm a reference librarian at the Brookline Village Library. And we're so excited to bring you another week of yoga with the help and generous sponsorship of the Friends of the Brookline Public Library, who sponsored this program, as well as programs like it. And before we get started, I just have to read a brief disclaimer. Participation in this online yoga program could result in injury. Not all exercises presented here are suitable for everyone. These exercises are not intended to substitute for proper medical care or advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any exercise program. The creators, teachers, and producers assume no responsibility for injuries from participation in this program. And without further ado, I give you Keith.
Hi, good morning. So let's sit in mountain pose, or you could stand in mountain pose too. And we're going to take a few breaths. Thinking about our good posture, feeling supported under the feet and under the buttocks if you're seated. And each time you breathe in, feel the spine lengthening slightly, or feel a lightness coming as you breathe in. A lightness in the chest, and when the chest lifts, the whole torso lifts, and that means the spine extends just a little bit. So these are really micro movements. When we talk about extending things, getting just a little bit more, and we always want to do this without tensing the body. So that usually means less effort than we might otherwise use. So think about less than 50% effort. So if you're trying really hard, it's in one way it's commendable, but it's counterproductive because it tends to create tension in other parts of the body. And in order for the spine to extend, we need for other parts of the body to also be able to lengthen and also to relax. So as the spine is extending up, think about the shoulders relaxing down. Let the arms hang down. And as the shoulders hang down, feel the weight of the shoulders and the arms in your feet. It's as if the weight is traveling down the body, down the legs, down into the feet, or into the buttocks too. So we want to feel the weight supported underneath us, and that's our base in which to extend. And then go ahead and bring up one palm right to the navel, right to the belly. And as you breathe in, feel the belly get bigger. So we want to be using the diaphragm. So the diaphragm is that muscle that runs just underneath the lungs at around the base of the ribs. It separates the internal organs down here from the lungs up here. And we want to feel the diaphragm, it's moving down. As we contract, it actually is kind of a dome shape. And as we contract, it shortens and the lungs get pulled down as the diaphragm moves down. And then as we exhale, the opposite is happening. We're releasing the diaphragm, it's going back up, and the belly begins to go in. You might even notice as you exhale that there's a little firmness that comes to the belly, and that at the end of the exhalation, that firmness, it feels like the navel is just gently pressing back towards the spine. And that's going to help move a little more air out. And then it's very important when we begin to inhale, we have to relax the belly. If the belly's not relaxed, it doesn't expand well. So we need to relax the belly on the inhalation and then begin to firm the belly up on the exhalation. But just like before, when we extend the spine with the right amount of effort, we need to not over effort the belly. If we do, it creates tension, and that's counterproductive. So we want the belly to really to move freely, but with a little bit of that extra support as we're exhaling. And then as we're inhaling, the belly is soft. You could even put both hands and feel the belly out with the breath. It's like a balloon. So we call this diaphragmatic breathing. And it is the first part of what we would call a yogic breath in yoga, or a three-part breath, or a complete breath. Because the other areas, the thoracic area where the ribs are and up around the clavicle, is two more parts of the lungs that we're able to fill with a little more of our attention and a little more of our breath when we breathe in. And so we're going to try that next. So the diaphragmatic breathing is the first part, and this part down here moves the most. So don't expect the ribs to expand as much, but they move a little bit. So as you breathe in, you're feeling the belly expanding. Move the hands up slightly to the lower ribs and notice how they begin to move out as well. And then we're going to exhale the belly first, and then the ribs are going to soften. So think about it like a wave. The breath is coming into the belly and it's coming up into the ribs. So this is part one and part two. And then as we exhale the belly, and then the ribs soften. So just like with the belly receding back on the exhalation, the ribs soften and recede slightly. So it's the intercostal muscles that are holding the ribs together. So call this the two-part breath, the belly and the ribs. And go ahead and check your posture again. If you need to use the back of the chair, feel free to slide back. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with being supported by the chair. That's why we use it. And if you're standing and you begin to get tired, or you're tired of standing, try sitting down. And changing our position can give some real insight into the breath, because when we change our position, whether it's sliding forward and back in the chair and being supported by the back, or moving away from the back of the chair and not being supported, it feels a little different. So we begin to learn, we begin to be able to focus more into what does it feel like when I'm doing this breathing mindfully or with intention. We'll call this intentional breathing. And then the final area is up here around the collarbones and the upper part of the chest. This area moves the least of the three. So as you breathe in, feel the belly getting bigger, feel the ribs expanding. So remember, you can do this. You can put one hand up here just beneath the throat. Spread the fingers out wide too. Makes it a little easier to feel. And also spread the bottom fingers out. And see if you notice when you breathe in at the near the end of the inhalation, how the chest, the top of the chest here lifts, and the clavicle, the collarbone, moves slightly to the side. And it's almost a micro movement up here. It's small. So you just feel a little bit of opening here. And then as I exhale, I soften the belly, relax the ribs, and I release the collarbones and the upper chest. Think of that wave rolling into the belly and the ribs, up into the collarbones. And then the wave rolls out again as you exhale. So the wave's always traveling up from the belly up, whether or not the wave is exhaling and the body's going back in, receding, or whether or not the inhalation is lifting and opening the front of the body. And with practice, you might even notice that the side ribs, and maybe even a little bit in the back ribs open when we inhale, and the shoulder blades open when we're breathing up into the top of the lungs. But those are all smaller and uh, subtle feelings. So in the beginning, just work on the front part. And again, the most important thing, well, maybe the three really important things are feeling grounded in your feet. So we have that support to be able to keep the spine lifted. We have that feeling, we're bringing our attention to being able to feel the torso moving with the breath, and finally, not overdoing. If we overdo it, it creates tension and it makes it hard to feel anything going on here, actually, because once we start to tense the body, whether it's the jaw, sometimes we do that, even though we're down here, we'll clench the jaw and the teeth together. So try to relax, keep the jaw relaxed. Even the eyes, little muscles in the eyes sometimes tense. So we always that balance of ease and effort. Let's go ahead and bring the hands down. And let's begin with a little sound, just to listen, just to focus in. So we're here on our yoga chair, and we bring our attention here and do our best to let go of anything else that's been on our minds. So staying right in our yoga chair and not paying attention to the other stuff. Just focusing on the breath, on the posture. So something to think about as we practice today, and perhaps as you go about your day today or future days, one of the things to think about with our posture is keeping it moving, not staying in one spot too long. It's a really nice way to maintain our movability, to actually change our position periodically. And what I mean by that is maybe every 10, 15 minutes, certainly every half an hour. And there's a lot of study that's been done in recent years that when we sit for a really long time, it's not good for us. So that the alternative to that, because we often have to sit, or we're limited in what we can do. We can't always just go up and go for a walk because it's not possible. We're not able to do that for our commitments won't let us do that. But we can often stand up. And so I would encourage you to just for a moment, just take a moment and either stand up or change your position in the chair. So if you're not standing because of balance issues, really change your position, slide all the way to the front of the chair so that you just feel the sitting bones and the backs of the legs are out like this. And then go ahead and try your posture again like that and see how it feels a little different than when you're sitting back in the chair. But if you're able to, and you want to stand up for a moment, go ahead and stand up and feel what that feels like on your posture. And also, so it also affects your breath. So we were just working with the breath. So notice, take a couple more breaths, just the diaphragmatic breaths. And notice that when we stand up, our posture is different. There might be a tendency for the belly to protrude out, so we get a little bit more curve in the lower back. So we want curve back here, but not too much. And we also don't want to lean. We don't want sometimes we do this where the hips stick forward, and we might need to firm up the belly. So now we're training ourselves when we're standing up. We firm the belly, but leave the belly with enough softness so we can actually breathe into the belly. So we have that juxtaposition of the effort, the firmness keeping us lifted, and the release of the belly partially so that we can breathe. So encourage you to think about this during our yoga class as well, because we sit a fair amount. Feel free to stand up at any time for 30 seconds or a minute. See what it feels like different. And you'll notice some of the things that we do. We're going to do sun breaths. We're going to start with that. You could do them standing or seated or against the back of the chair. So let's begin with that, with bringing the palms together and then inhaling up and circling around. If you're seated, another thing you can try is adjusting the width of the knees. The width of the knees. You can even play with, you don't have to have a yoga block. You can use a rolled up towel or even I have a box of tissues here. Box of tissues, kind of looks like a block. I could hold that between my legs. It's a nice way to begin to activate these inner thighs. And when we sit a lot, one of the things that doesn't work so well is the gluteal muscles and the inner thighs. They're just sitting there like lumps. But holding something like this, we're not squeezing hard, just a little bit, and sitting up tall. And the alternative is, of course, you could stand. You could even stand with a block between the legs. This is actually quite, I used to have a teacher who used to always teach to hold, when we were in mountain pose, to have a block between the legs to activate the inner thighs. And when you activate these inner thighs, you can actually, it makes it easier to lift the inner arches. So there's a connection down here between the inner arches. And for many of us, our arches have kind of collapsed in. So in order to activate that, we activate the inner thighs. And the one thing that's nice about a block is you can actually squeeze it. You could do that with a towel too. Make sure whatever you use isn't too heavy though, in case it'll fall. So when it falls, if it's heavy, it's really unpleasant for your feet or toes. You could injure your toes or your feet. So please be mindful of that. So whether you're standing up or you're seated, we're doing our, I sort of stopped doing the sun breath, sorry. So hopefully you were still doing it, and let's rest for a moment. And that's the other thing. So remember, this is your practice, especially since we're not together in the same space. You have to sort of monitor yourself, and you have to decide, when you get tired, pause for a minute. I even pause for 10 seconds and relax. That's the time to try a couple of those breaths. And let's do it the other way. Relaxing the hands down, turning the palms up, and hands are floating up. So as the hands come up, think about pressing the feet down, feeling a little more weight in the soles of the feet as the hands are floating up. And then let the hands come together and float gently down. So we're circling around, adjusting the size of the circles to suit your own shoulders. You might notice the chin lifts up and down a little bit. If you're seated, you might notice the pelvis tilting, rocking a little. Harder to notice it when you're standing. It might be. You could even stand and soften the knees ever so slightly, so that as the hands are coming down, it's hard to tell, but my knees bend ever so slightly. It's not so much the knees bending, although maybe they move an inch forward and back this way, back and forth this way, but it's a softening. I relax them so my legs aren't straight. So this is my legs straight. So in mountain pose, we normally activate the quadriceps, pulls the kneecaps up, and really supports the pelvis. We want some firmness in the belly too. And then we're going this way. And then go ahead and bring the hands down. Let's swing the arms. A little gentle turning. So if you're standing, you're able to shift the weight a little bit more easily. And if you're seated, you can move from side to side and the weight shifts a little bit, but it's not as noticeable. It's easier. You can want a little bit more. You can lift that foot up if you're standing, almost like you're skating. Make sure your balance is okay though. And then if that's still too easy, you can go slower and then lift the foot. So the first step is really just to lift the heel up and get most of the weight on this foot over here. And having the toes here is a nice for balance. And then we're going back the other way. Notice the knees are soft here. They're not locked. And if I was seated, it would be really similar. I can still put most of the weight on this side of the body. So I'm leaning over here, and then I'm leaning the other way. And I could also lift the foot all the way up. And I suppose you could even do that if you wanted to. You could even do that going from side to side here. Really lifting the foot up more. And even higher, balancing. So if you're concerned at all about balance, go ahead and have that chair handy in front of you, so that when you're lifting up, you can, if nothing else, put a finger on it. That might be enough, or put a few fingers, or put the fingers of both hands. Try not to lean into the chair. So we're not using the chair as we're using it as a touchstone, really, for balance. Almost like if you, and let's come back down and let's just swing again. Nice and easy, coat sleeves, we call this. If you're at nighttime and it's really dark, that you don't have a night light on and there's no moon and there's no lights on, one of the ways that we find our way is by using our hands, not only so we don't run into things, but actually helps our balance. Because as soon as we touch something, we get information and we can adjust our balance based on that touch. We do it automatically. And then let's all go ahead and sit down and take a couple of breaths, a couple of cactus breaths. Bring the hands together, inhale and exhale. And then begin to flap your wings forward and back. Exhale. And then if you like, you can cross, beginning first with the elbows and then working your way up the arms until you get to the shoulders, if that's a good spot for you, or even the shoulder blades. So this is not straining to wrap ourselves up, to give ourselves a hug. Little hug. Nice. Think about your posture when you do this. Not over-efforting, but keeping the spine a little lifted so we feel buoyant. That buoyancy also affects our mental state. If you notice people, we don't get to see people as closely maybe as we used to, but as things start to open up and people feel more comfortable and you're vaccinated and everything gets a little more back to normal, notice that when people seem friendly and peppy and happy, that their posture is better, and that people who are um, maybe not depressed, but they don't look as happy. They tend to slump. And those two things go together. I don't know which one. I mean, it's not really possible to tell which one started the other, but when we feel better, we have better posture. Everything looks better. Our body feels better. We're standing up taller. And when we're unhappy, we slump um, and some people say it's kind of guarding the heart. Maybe think of it that way. When we're concerned or we're unhappy, we're guarding our heart, which means we're collapsing like this around the heart. But when we're feeling good and our heart feels open, we open the chest, and we like to see people. So think about that, and by engaging and lifting your heart, you can actually elevate your mood a little bit. Makes us feel a little bit better. They're tied together. Try it. Try walking around with a little bit of spring in your step and a little openness in the chest. See if that helps. And sitting up nice and tall. Let's begin to work the joints in the body. It's finally starting to get warmer, so this is maybe a little easier. Starting by rocking the feet. I'll turn sideways so you can see. Noticing, feeling the balls of the feet and the heels. Feeling the balls of the feet and the heels, and keeping the spine lifted. Make sure you're lifting the spine at the same time. So there's I'm seated here, so I'm feeling the sitting bones underneath the buttocks, the sitting bones at the base of the pelvis, right underneath where the perineum is, or right next to the perineum. And then I'm rocking slowly enough where I can feel the balls of the feet. See if you can feel this whole ball of the foot here, from the big toe to the little toe, touching the floor, and then the heel as well. So when I rock, it rocks from the heel up the underside of the foot, up to the ball of the foot. And I'm focusing on feeling each of those areas. If you need to, as you lift the heels up, pause there for a moment to feel the balls of the feet, and then go ahead and release the heels down. Lift the balls of the feet up, and then feel the heels. And then go back and forth. In the beginning, go slowly, and it's easier to feel. And then over time, if you practice regularly, you'll be able to feel it even though you're moving faster. If you go too fast, it's very hard to feel those areas. You feel them, but it's so momentary that it doesn't register very well. And let's add do the hands too. Try that with rocking the hands like this. So this is that movement with the wrist up and then down. So I'm using a slight bit of effort to curl the hand down. So there's a little contraction going on in the wrist, only if the wrist feels okay. So anybody who has carpal tunnel, or, it's not uncommon. Wrist problems, especially as we get older, is not uncommon, or problems in the joints, the base of the thumb. We get arthritis. So you only want to move to a place where it feels okay. If you overdo it and you begin to cross into where we're creating pain, it actually aggravates the joint, and it's going to make it worse over time. And then go ahead and lower the hands down, and let's scoot all the way back and go ahead and lift. Actually, let's do this. Let's lift the legs up first, one at a time. Nice and casual here, not too much effort. Making sure that we still have a long, extended spine. So don't lose the extension here. You want to be lifting, lift the heart. Think about that joyful feeling joyful by lifting the heart, influencing our mood with our posture. And notice that my hamstrings are pretty tight. So when I lift, this is comfortable for me. Notice my leg isn't totally straight. And the only other thing is, and I can't do it, but if you hyperextend your knee, which means that you can straighten your leg and then your foot even goes higher so that the leg starts to curve back in this direction. Don't go there. We only want to go to where the joint is straight and not hyperextended. We're not trying to stretch the joints here. We're just trying to engage the muscles. That's the important thing. It's sort of flipping. Let's try that actually. So the other thing is you could try just lifting both feet, doing like a little flipper action like this. Keeping the toes up. So see if you can keep everything on track here. Hips, knees, feet are in a line. And being able to lift the spine. If you need to, slide back, keep sliding back in the chair, lifting up, firming the belly up, firming the belly. Let's try this. Let's lift one leg up and move the navel in slightly. You could even take your fingertips like this and gently press against the belly. And as you're pressing the belly, firm the belly up. It's almost like the belly's pushing back. And that's how we're going to teach the belly to activate. So we need to keep this active to support the back when we remove the support like the feet. Especially if we remove both feet like this, the support now only comes from the spine. Or I should say the support for the spine only comes from the verticality, the muscles around the spine and the abdomen, and then back down. So we start out with one leg and work the belly here. And then if that's easy, or over time we get more strength here, we can do both legs. And if that's still easy, you can go slower. That's definitely harder. When you go slow, you could even pause with your legs up. But we want to do that with the spine lifted and not overstraining. If we're straining the belly and the back, that's no good. So you have your choices between one leg going up. You could even do one leg slowly if you wanted to. So remember, slower is harder. So pace yourself. Better to go a little faster and keep this length in the spine than it is to go slow and basically start collapsing. And if you keep doing this, maybe not every day, but maybe every other day, you'll get stronger. It does take a few weeks. Probably takes they usually say to build strength, go ahead and lower the legs down. In order to build strength, usually takes at least 3 to 4 weeks to start to build strength. And it can take several months or even longer to really build strength back into a muscle. And that's also one of the reasons for that is we're also retraining the muscles. So neurologically, it takes time, as well as it takes time to build the muscular tissue, the strength, and strengthen the fibers. So sitting up nice and tall, let's slide forward in the chair, and let's circle around. Remembering to extend the spine as we do this. So we want to make sure that as we're going around in that circle with the shoulders, that the spine is lengthened. So as I come forward, the bending is coming down here where the thighs meet. So this is my front hip bones right here. Let's try this. Take your fingertips, put them on the front hip bones, and lean forward slightly, and then come back up. You might want to adjust your feet here, perhaps a little closer together, or perhaps slightly wider, so that you can feel the weight moving to the feet. So as I come forward, as I lean forward, notice that my spine is still lengthened. And I'm coming back and forth. I'm engaging the belly here. Got to keep the belly engaged to support the spine. Otherwise, the back has to do all the work. And after a while, the back's not happy about that. And it's a big, weak abdominals is a big cause of that, can lead to back problems. The back ends up doing all the work, and then it gets strained. And then it also changes the shape of the spine changes. So if we got firmness here and firmness in the back, it's easier to maintain the stability in the pelvis and get those nice curves, normal curves in the spine. Sitting up nice and tall. And so do that circling now. Thinking about as I come forward, folding at the hips. And as I lean back, I also want to maintain straightness. So I'm really using the belly as I'm going backwards here, kind of like I'm leaning back. Let's try that. Come back up for a second. And go ahead and rest the hands on the belly like this. And then begin to lean back. So if that's challenging, if you find that to be really challenging, you can also take the hands, put them on the chair slightly behind you, and begin to lean back. And that's a way to begin to feel what is it like to lean back and to keep these belly muscles engaged. So it's almost like this is like a little learning to engage the belly. So as I lean back, some of the weight's going into the arms to keep me from falling backwards, and then feel the belly firming up here to keep you from falling back. So we want to be feeling here with the support of the hands and arms. And now let's go back, try the circle again. So getting the belly folding and leaning back slightly, keeping that belly engaged. And then the belly softens as we come forward. So we're alternating between the belly doing most of the work as we're going back and the back doing more of the work as we're going forward. We can use the hands and arms to help guide us here. Notice how the elbows are bending. I can bend the elbows and then straighten the arms to help lift me back up so the back doesn't have to work quite so hard. What I like about this movement with the arms is that you get coordination between the elbow, between the triceps, and the arms are working with the back to keep us going in this circular movement. So it's not just it's not an isolated, and let's go the other way. The muscles are working in sort of a group. They're working together. And I like that. That feels nice to me, kind of like when we walk, when we do any activity that requires a multiple muscular actions, we have to learn to do that. And we take for granted many of those things, like walking or running or swimming. But we were not born being able to do those things. They were actually quite challenging. And if you think about babies and you think about one learning to walk, it takes them a while. First they have to stand up, and that takes a while. And then sitting up nice and tall. Let's lean from side to side. You can bring the hands up like this, or if you want a little bit more support, you can bring the hands to the sides of the chair, or the arms if you have arms on your chair. So just leaning. And then, of course, a baby, eventually they walk and then they begin to run. And if you want to learn to swim, so oftentimes we learn as a kid or learn as a child to swim. And that also takes time. That's not an easy process to learn. Swimming lessons just staying afloat, not even the different strokes that we do. And let's go ahead and do the neck. So sitting up nice and tall, lifting the chin, and then releasing the chin down. So go back and forth here. And if you're tired of sitting, this might be a good time to stand if you're into standing. You remember you've got your chair, so if you need to move around to the back of the chair or pull the chair in front, or get two chairs, one behind and one in front, and you can just turn the head. And then we'll turn side to side. Notice how the weight's even on the 2 feet underneath you, and if you're seated, even in the two buttocks, the left and the right. And then we'll tip the head. And this is one of those things where you could add a little bit more leaning if you wanted. So sometimes it's nice to have a little bit more of a fuller bend, not just the neck, but the thoracic spine, even actually the whole spine bends a little bit. But I am keeping things relatively stable down here in the pelvis and the lower back. But it's your choice. Your other choice would be to just stand up straight and release the ear like this. And notice there's not much bending here in the rest of the spine, a little bit. And you might like one better than the other. So you can try them both and then just decide which one you want to do and which one feels better today. Sometimes for functionality, the movements that involve other parts of the body a little bit can be a little more functional in the sense of making our general movements that we make throughout the day more easier. If we want to focus on something specific, like just the neck, then we might just release the neck to the side like this. And then we're going to circle the head. So be mindful, whenever we circle the head, being mindful about not getting dizzy and also balance. Actually, any head movements, especially if we move the head quickly. You know, the inner ear is very much affected by the movement of the head, and that is really our balancing center. And standing up nice and tall. So let's go on, speaking of balance, we're going to go on to our balance pose. We're going to do a tree pose. And in part because every day now when we go out, there's new trees, although there's a lot of pollen too. The pollen's kind of tough. But the trees are beautiful, and they're all pretty much all have some leaves. Some are fully leafed and some are still partially leafed, and there's a lot of flowers on the trees. So either sitting or standing up nice and tall, depending on whether or not your tree is a standing tree or a sitting tree, and extending the spine. And then go ahead and step that foot out to the side. So one set of toes is pointed straight, the other set is pointed more to the side. And so there's an opening between the thighs, about a 90-degree opening. And then I'll bring my sole of the foot, if I'm seated, to the outside of the chair leg like this, and extending the arms like this. And if you're standing, you can bring your sole of the foot to the inside of the thigh like this. Think about pressing that straight leg or the foot that's pointed straight ahead. Press that foot into the floor. Press it into the floor, extending the spine up You can have a drishti point, a focus point, a concentration. And you can try this. You can try looking up and finding a drishti point, or some people might be better with looking out in front, about maybe 10 feet out in front towards the floor. That might give you better concentration in this pose. So you experiment a little and then come on down. Let's do the other side. So we'll do it twice. I'll show it first, mostly seated, and then we'll stand for the second one. So that drishti point is sometimes gazing up gives us this feeling of lifting, and sometimes looking down gives us a feeling of groundedness. So it kind of depends on where you're at. So sitting up nice and tall, and then stepping out like this. Trying to keep the torso facing towards the front. So we want to be facing the camera. And then go ahead and position your foot, whether the sole's on the inside of the calf or the outside of the chair leg. And then go ahead and extend the arms up. And then pick your place to focus. Pick your place to focus your attention. So looking up makes us feel more maybe energetic. Looking down can be more grounding. If we need to be a little more grounded today, we don't feel grounded enough, try looking down. And of course, remember to breathe. That most important thing is always to breathe and open the heart, open the chest, keep the shoulders relaxed. You could also work with the hands. We've done this with the heart, or out, or even above like this, your choice. And then go ahead and come on down. Let's swing the arms for a moment. Let that weight shift from one foot to the other. So we always want to bring balance back. When we do a pose on one side and another, we want to bring balance back to both feet so that we're feeling like when we stop, things are even. We don't feel out of balance. And let's go ahead. And so you can continue to do the same thing. If you're seated, do the same thing as before. Otherwise, if you want to stand, and remember, please, if you need help with balance, have your chair handy, even just to the side like this. Nice way, you can always just rest a hand on it. And standing up or sitting up nice and tall, and then stepping the foot out, and just tap the toe for now, for a minute. Lift the foot up, tap the toe, and feel what it's like for the weight to shift in more into the other side of the body. And then you can go ahead and bring the sole of the foot wherever is comfortable. So you want to make sure the knee, you can also bring the sole of the foot up on the inside of the thigh, but make sure the knee likes that. You know, if you have sensitive knees, this may be too much for your knees. So I have one knee that is okay with this and one knee is not. So this knee is actually okay, but I'll show it with like this. So be mindful of your knees, especially if you're going to work with the sole on the thigh. And then you can add the arms and find that drishti point. And breathe, extending the spine, pressing the foot into the floor as you extend up, out of the foot, up through the crown of the head. And if you need to step down for balance, you can always come back. And then please lower the arms down and come down. Let's swing for a moment. Bring some evenness. Think about evenness in the 2 feet. And let's do the other side. Come back to our mountain pose, extending the spine up, stepping the opposite foot out. So one set of toes point straight, the others out to the side, and then finding a spot for the sole of the foot. And then you can add the arms if you want. You don't have to add the arms too. You could work like this. You could even, if you're in a chair, you could even support yourself with the hands on the seat of the chair. And that helps to give a little more lift to the torso. So if you want more lift, you could use the hands in the chair. Pressing the foot down, extending the spine up, and breathing. You can always come down, rest for a moment, and then come on down, please. Swing the arms. Just make sure that if you're going to sit back down and you used your chair, that you put it back in the right spot. Swinging the arms. Now, before we sit down, let's do a little bit. We're going to do some opening for the front of this, where the torso and the hip meet. We're going to step the foot back and then forward. So forward and back like this. And so the chair can be really handy for that because it's definitely harder to balance. So I'm not leaning, but I can touch my fingers on it. It also gives me a little placeholder so I can step my foot just up to the chair. So it gives me a place to put my foot back and forth. As I step back, think about activating the gluteal muscles. And notice how there's a curve this way. The curve is this way. I'm lifting the heart up. You could add the arm too if you wanted, one arm. Or you could add both arms. I'm not using the lower back here, by the way. So when I step back like this, I activate the gluteal muscles, but I'm not lifting the leg up like this. So I'm trying to avoid using the lower back because I don't want to strain the back. Let's do the other side. And that's why when we step back like this with the toes on the ground and the gluteal muscles, what happens is when these muscles contract, it opens this front of the hip area. I mean, the hip joint is over here, but it opens where the quadricep meets the pelvis, or the quadricep meets the spine. It actually is connecting up inside here. But I'm stepping forward and back, and I can lift the arms up. Let's see if I can, like this. Or remember, we can do one arm too. One arm is good too. I may need to firm the belly a little here too. So sometimes the belly wants to stick out, and I want it to be, I want the curve in the back, but I don't want too much. And I want support from the belly. So when I do this, the back muscles are contracting a little bit just because the shape. The gluteal muscles are contracting. I firm up the belly to help lift the spine up so that the back muscles aren't contracting and having to hold the back up, and then stepping back. And let's swing the arms again. So coat sleeves again. Back and forth. And we're gonna sit down and sit up nice and tall. And we're gonna do some eagle arms. So we've been working with eagle arms. So we'll hold the arms out like this and take a couple of breaths. Inhale. And then we're going to cross one arm over the other. So the elbow is in the crook of the other elbow. So we start out like, I'm going to lean forward so you can see it looks like this, but my arms are up holding like this. And then I'm going to cross like this, like a V shape. And then I can intertwine, or if my hands don't reach, intertwining, I have a strap, a handkerchief even, doesn't matter what. Any kind of piece of cloth, a towel, a small towel would work. Or even if you had a rag, You could just tear a strip off. This is just a little a rubber, like an exercise band. If you have one of those, or a string or a piece of rope. More like a rope. A string won't work. It's not big enough. And take a couple of breaths here, and then go ahead and release. Let's do the other side. So we did, I think we did the left over right. So we're going to do the right over left. So starting out like this in the front, hands are out in front. And remember, in the beginning, you can work like this, and then even up like this, and turning like this to start to feel what it feels like to be intertwined. So like this, and then a V shape, and then begin to intertwine like this. And breathe. Most important thing here is to breathe. Release the shoulders down. There's a tendency sometimes for the shoulders to rise up towards the ears. See if you can keep the shoulders relaxed. And if this is really easy and you're intertwined with great comfort, you can begin to lift the elbows up and then move the elbows away from the heart slightly. Keeping the shoulders relaxed though. We always want to maintain relaxed shoulders here and elbows no higher than the shoulders. Face and eyes are soft. And then go ahead and on an exhale, release the arms and come back down. And let's sit up nice and tall, and let's swing the arms again. Actually, let's do this. Let's bring the elbows up. Just move the elbows back. Let the body turn a little bit. So we're feeling that movement across the body, that diagonal movement from the hip to the opposite shoulder, or the opposite elbow. Hip, cross the body up into the elbow. Hip, cross the body up into the elbow, and then coming back, rolling the shoulders, and then the other way. Add a few sun breaths. We're going to begin to warm down now, or cool down. I hate to say cool down because we want to stay warm. At the end of our yoga practice, we are going to cool down naturally, but we don't want to over cool. We want the muscles to stay relaxed. And then we'll bring the palms together and then release them down and go the other way. And then we're going to settle into our chairs for our Savasana. So usually using the back of the chair, you can also use a pillow, or I'm actually going to add a little bit to stay a little warmer. So just like with sleep, relaxation and sleep, the body temperature drops naturally. So in order to relax, in order to go to sleep, our body temperature drops. That's sometimes you might notice that if you're starting to fall asleep, you get cold because your body temperature has been dropping. And that's normal. We need that drop in body temperature to trigger the relaxation and the sleep. Of course, we're not sleeping right now, but the relaxation we want. So settle into your chair, or settle in if you're laying on the floor or on the bed. Make sure if you do lay down, it needs to be a really firm place. We want support for the spine. And we're going to work with the breath here. Think about that either diaphragmatic breath, just the belly, or you could even work with the 3-part breath if you're familiar with that enough. With about 50% effort, and maybe a little bit less, so we're not over efforting. Remember, it's always good if you can stay in Shavasana for 5 or 10 minutes. Please do that. Just stay with the eyes closed, focused on the breath. And if the mind wanders away from the breath, when you notice that, just come back to the breath. Everybody's mind wanders. It's normal. The important thing is to just keep coming back. We'll stay like this for another minute or so, and then we'll conclude the formal part of our class. Please stay if you have time a little bit longer in Savasana. Always beneficial. Even 5 minutes makes improves our attitude and our mental health. That relaxation doesn't make everything better, but things feel a little bit better. It doesn't change the world, but it changes us a little bit. So we'll see everyone next time, and we'll go for about another minute. I'll tap the bell to signal the end of our class, and I'll see everyone next time. Thank you all very much, and namaste.